Welcome to part 2 of Getting Together. Now, we will begin with the theories of mate selection, and we're going to start with evolutionary theory of mate selection. Basically, it states that men and women have evolved different criteria for mate selection. Women, because of the length of their pregnancy and breastfeeding, prefer men interested in long-term relationships that have social status and are physically strong. Men, because of women's fertility is not obvious, prefer youth and attractiveness. Both prefer kindness, health, and dependability. Now, contemporary needs hypothesis, that is to say, proposes that individuals feel most attracted to potential partners who complement them. As a result, the saying of opposites attract is their thinking. Now, similarity theory suggests, as you might imagine, something different. Individuals feel most attracted to potential partners who are similar to them. They reflect the saying of birds of a feather flock together. Now, the social exchange theory is based on the idea that individuals evaluate potential success of a relationship based on a number of comparisons. For example, peer comparisons, physical attractions in female partners, status, financial resources in male partners, for example. People tend to fall between the two extremes, both exchanging values and emotional appeals to attract a mate. The stimulus value role theory is based on the thought that couples pass through 3 stages in choosing a mate. The first, attraction, is based on some sort of stimulus. Attractiveness, for example, money, style. 2, if there's enough attraction, then they discuss values and their beliefs. They're checking for further compatibility. And then 3, is there enough compatibility and common ground that they can form a close, they can decide to adopt and play the roles of a couple? Sociological perspectives on mate selection, it lets us consider our theoretical perspectives here. We're going to touch base on the ones that we're going to be using all through the semester. And we'll start with structural functionalists. Structural functionalism, they see mate selection as critical to social order and the continuing of society. Our mating is the primary function of a family to produce children. This matters irregardless of mate selection method. How you get into a family is if the structural functionalist means it's little. It's just that you put together, you have children, you increase membership in society. Now, conflict, they look at mate selection. It tends to follow an existence of class structure in society. This includes how is it that the dominant group have more choice in mate selection. Feminists, they're similar to conflict theory with the division of gender. Here, feminists see women as objects of exchange based on looks while disregarding other criteria like accomplishments and other successes. Now, the symbolic interactionists, you recall, are the only one that we really look at as predominantly micro. Symbolic interactionalism, they look at the communication in the developing relationship. They consider the how and why of what attracts people to one another. Now, we're going to touch on another area of getting together that probably is more current than it has been historic, and that is looking at sexuality as being a part of the development of an intimate relationship. We need to explore some of the terminology to better understand the diversity of the human experience. First, sexuality, or how we express ourselves as a sexual being. This includes the biological, emotional, and social, even the spiritual aspects. So let's begin by distinguishing between sex and gender, and this is a huge one. I teach a course in gender studies, and this is one of the key points. Sex is our biology. It's the anatomical differences, generally male and female. However, there are examples of people who are intersexed, have both male and female characteristics. The term intersex gets confused with transsexual, which refers to people who have been born with one identifiable sex and have modification surgery usually, or hormones, to become the other sex. Now, gender, this is socially constructed. It's culturally based and has a component of psychological trait and behaviors that relate to being masculine or feminine. We're not born with masculinity or femininity. We learn from our culture what it is to be masculine and feminine, and that's why it's different from culture to culture. So transgendered is a broad term for people whose identity, who you think they are, or who you think you are, that inside yourself, who you think you are, and it's incongruent with the sex that they've been assigned. I have a cousin who has transited from female to male, and I have another cousin who's gone female to male, and it just is the absolute what your brain is telling you and what you see in the mirror just don't jive. Sexual orientation is a reflection of a person's personal preferences for sexual partners. Sexually attracted to people of the opposite sex is heterosexual. We can include bisexual, or people who are sexually attracted to either sex, and asexual, they're not sexually attracted to either sex. All this can make growing up and family development much more challenging for some people. Now let's look at the new custom, dating and beyond. Dating allows individuals to go out alone together without intervention or without the intention of marrying. Historically, this has been based on 4 standards of sexual relations among unmarried people. The marital standard, the double standard, the sex with affection standard, and the sex for pleasure standards. Now, the marital standard is sex is only for when you're married and only to produce children. The double standard you may have heard of is where men seem to have more sexual freedom. It's natural, let them sow their wild oats. Then women, when they are more active, they might be viewed as promiscuous. Sex with affection is kind of the I like you and you're attractive, so this seems to be acceptable. And then there's, of course, sex for pleasure. And this emerged more in the 60s. Youth embraced the changes, and the openness plus the advent of birth control pill impacted this development. Now, attitudes towards premarital sexual activity continued to become more and more permissive until about the 1980s. And since then, things have stayed relatively level. Dating in adolescence serves 4 primary functions, or 4 goals. One is identity. It's an important activity in youth to self-explore and identity formation. 2, intimacy. The pursuit of a committed, exclusive relationship that fosters self-disclosure, emotional intimacy, interdependence, emotional attachment. Now, that's not something that we generally achieve in our adolescence, but it's where we begin to discover these elements about who we are. 3, status. It's a way to enhance social relationships with social status. And then sex. The initiation into a sexual experience and fulfillment. Now, issues related to same-sex relationships in the teen years, although there's more acceptance, there is still stigma and challenges with friends and family. Same-sex dating can be difficult for high school students and post-secondary students due to the prejudice and other pressures. Even physical harassment still occurs. Because of social expectations and stigma, because social expectations and stigma rarely acceptable outside of gay and lesbian society to bring a date for the same-sex social function. Often same-sex dating is postponed until adulthood. The more dialogue between child and parent regarding sexuality and intimacy contributes to the late first-time sexual experiences. What children are not engaged. When children are not engaged with their parents, they may be more permissive and maybe also turn to alcohol to engage sexual activity earlier. The term hooking up, it's a term used to identify a wide range of sexual behaviors. They usually involve little to any promise or desire for long-term committed relationships. Now, we can also touch base in things with such issues that enter the relationship of contraception, sexually transmitted infections, and online dating. These are current issues, and we're going to touch on them now. Contraception and the advent of women's choice and control over their own sexuality. Contraception has had the general effect of lowering teen pregnancies. However, STIs, or sexually transmitted infections, are increasing. The incident rates are high among adolescents, young adults, middle-aged, and older adults. This is not just a youth experience. HIV, or the human immunodeficiency virus, is a virus that affects our immune system. The most chronic outcome is AIDS, an acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Now, when we talk about the process of getting together in the establishment of this intimate relationship, today it's more risky than ever that was in the past. One of the areas of danger that can occur is through technology and dating. Facebook, Skype, Tinder, eHarmony. About a quarter of all Canadians say they have tried online dating sites. Four main social forces drive the rapid growth of online dating. The growing proportion of the population composed of singles. An increasing career and time pressures mean that groups of people need efficient ways to meet intimate potential partners. 3, single people are more mobile. And 4, workplace romances are on the decline due to the growing sensitivity around sexual harassment, not to mention that we are no longer in rooms together. Internet drastically expands the field of eligibility. Not everyone is satisfied with their dating experience, therefore we can consider the disadvantages. Not everyone seems to have the same access to opportunities for healthy, meaningful relationships. Much of the barriers are provided by media images of what is desirable and attractive in a partner. This is excluding some people. This can and it does include people's size, physical disabilities, and age. There are obstacles to relationships, including the communication gap, and that's probably one of the biggest. Many difficulties in intimate relationships relate to gender role socialization, how we were raised to believe to be men and women. Secondly, men tend to use communication to achieve goals, establish authority, compete for attention and power. Women tend to use communication to build connections and solve problems. Thus, both become baffled and hurt by the perceived lack of understanding in their own partner. Same-sex couples tend to adopt more equitable communication in their relationships. But in both same-sex and opposite-sex couples, communication about feelings more often occur non-verbally than verbally, and therefore misunderstandings are common. Individuals come to new relationships with expectations based on their past, learn from family and through relationships with others that they've had in their past. Some expectations result in a warped communication and crippled relationship. Examples: treating another as property or making the partner fit a fantasy ideal, deliberately over-representing oneself, are all problematic issues. The quality of the relationship during a process of mate selection is important for marriage and cohabitation. Once communication patterns are established, it's difficult to change them. Infidelity ranges from flirting to kissing to sexual intercourse, and it often breaks trust. No kidding. Reasons given for infidelity include relationship dissatisfaction, revenge, jealousy, desire for variety, sexual incompatibility. All the more reason to go back to one of the main reasons that there's barriers and problems in relationships, and that's communication. If these things are happening, then you haven't been talking. Dating violence takes on the same form as violence in marriage. Date rape reported more often than marital rape. Perhaps because sexual access is regarded as the right of spouse. In 1982, a law was introduced that said men could not demand sex of their partner. That was only in 1982. Sexual aggressiveness is more common among single men than single women. For men, it's related to the acceptance of what is known as rape myths, especially the belief that women, even when they're raped, enjoyed the sexual activity. And of course, that's a myth. Violence also occurs in lesbian gay relationships, similar to the frequency and the type that's between heterosexual partners. I'm sorry for the way that had to end on that kind of content. However, this is now the end and completes our review of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, we're going to look at wedding bells or not. We'll see you next week. Bye now.